This is not financial advice, not legal advice, for entertainment, educational purposes only, and anything I say is my opinion. Please don't make any financial decision based on anything I say in these videos. Listen, I was watching CSI's video, and he had mentioned that no action letter that Tony Donnahue put out that showed that over 20 years ago, the SEC said that forward agreements or forward purchase agreements were legal. First of all, forward purchase agreements still have to comply with the short sell and locate rules. Okay, they still have to comply with the short sell and locate rules. And this letter that Tony Donnahue put out is over 20 years old. At that time, we were at T+3. And at T+3, they still had to comply with the short selling placement rule. They still had to locate those shares within 3 days and deliver them. If not, there was a problem. And now, 21 years later, because this letter was in 2003, 21 years later, Tony Donnahue wants to make it look like this is okay. It is not okay, this forward service agreement, because they are not complying with the short sell and locate rules. But here's the thing. I did a little research. You know, the research they say we don't do. I wanted to see how these forward purchase agreements originated. I wanted some background so that I can understand exactly what they're doing. So as I start digging deeper, doing the research they say we don't do, I see that this started in commodities. Okay, these forward purchase agreements started with commodities, where like grain merchants and things like that, they would have purchase agreements with other merchants to purchase the grain and to supply it at a certain price to hedge against the falling price of the share of the grain, of whatever the commodity they were selling. It was not meant for stocks, and it definitely was not meant to be sold to the public. This was like accredited investors, entities selling to entities. Do you think they could have sold a forward purchase agreement to a retail investor in a commodities market? Listen, I need a pound of rice. Well, okay, pay me for the pound of rice today, and sometime in the future, I will deliver you the pound of rice. It doesn't work that way, because you need to feed your family today. So these forward purchase agreements that started in the commodities market was for entities. It was never meant to be used with the end buyer, with retail buyers. You weren't going to give a forward contract to somebody who wants to feed their family today. That was not going to work. It was not acceptable. It was not done. But as they always do in the stock market, what these guys did was they looked at these forward purchase agreements in a commodities market, and they said, we can utilize this to rob and steal from retail investors. Because this, at first, when it first came out, was not meant to be sold to retail investors. This was meant to be sold between entities, between institutions. The end buyer, the end share buyer, the retail investors was not supposed to be getting shares that did not exist. And here's the other thing that bothers me about this. When you have a forward purchase agreement between two like-minded institutions, they both know what's going on. They know that they are buying a contract for shares in the future. When we buy shares, do they let us know that we're getting counterfeit shares that doesn't exist? No, because if they did, we would not buy them. So the transparency rule does not exist with these forward purchase agreements when they go to retail investors. The institutions, they know what's going on. They know what they're buying. Retail investors have no idea that they're buying shares that don't exist. And that right there makes it absolutely, if not illegal, definitely questionable. Definitely questionable. And here's the other thing. These, in my opinion, bad actors enter into these agreements and plan on selling these shares to retail investors. And they know that they can violate the short selling placement requirements or locate requirements. So what do? They call their buddy at the SEC or they meet him at the country club and they tell him, listen, we're about to do a forward purchase agreement and we're going to be selling counterfeit shares so we can rob retail investors. Type us a letter saying that what we're doing is acceptable and you won't come after us. That's what's happening. They know what they're doing is questionable as hell. They know what they're doing violates the short selling rules. And in order to cover themselves, in order to hedge their, in my opinion, illegal position, they get the SEC to give them a no action letter saying that it's okay. Let me ask you guys a question. This is like me having the attorney general of a particular state in my pocket. And I tell the attorney general, listen, you my buddy, we're boys. I have a forward purchase agreement to purchase 50 million Mercedes-Benz sometime in the future. I want you to give me a no action letter saying that I can sell counterfeit Mercedes-Benz titles to retailers and let me know that you won't go after me for doing it. An attorney general, because they're my buddy, because they might even be benefiting from the transaction, gives me a no action letter saying that if I sell counterfeit Mercedes-Benz to the public at large, they won't go after me. So while I guess technically it would be legal, is that just? Is that proper? Yo, what they do to us is absolutely outrageous and would not be acceptable in any other industry. Tell me some other industry where you can go to the regulatory body of this industry and ask them permission to sell counterfeit merchandise from that industry. And then the regulatory agency of that industry gives you a letter saying, yes, you can sell counterfeit stuff and we won't go after you. And the thing is, the person buying the counterfeit stuff is not aware that it's counterfeit. If they want full transparency, if they want to make this forward agreement legit on its face, why don't they make it mandatory that they let retail investors know that the shares you're buying are counterfeit shares? These shares do not exist yet. We don't have them. We're just giving you counterfeit titles to these cars. But they don't do that. They don't do that. Okay? Our regulatory agencies are in bed with these criminals. And they have taken something that would be illegal everywhere else on the planet and somehow made it legal to sell counterfeit shares to the end user, to the public. Tell me what industry end users are allowed to buy counterfeit stuff. Can you sell a forward purchase agreement to somebody purchasing gas at the gas tank? Listen, I know you're purchasing the gas right now. I'd like the money up front, but come back in 2 or 3 weeks and you can get the gas. Tell me that would be acceptable. I know I want the money for the car right now. Here's a paper saying that you own the car. Come back in a few weeks. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. The end user is not aware that they're buying counterfeit goods, and it would not be acceptable in any other industry. And the fact that the SEC allowed it to go on 21 years ago, even with the letter, they still are required to follow the short selling locate rules. And when they don't deliver those shares in one day, it's a violation of the locate rules, okay? So they can put out all the letters they want. SEC could claim they're not going to go after them. But just because the SEC doesn't want to enforce the rules of the market, that doesn't mean they didn't break the rules. Anyway, please leave some comments. Tell me what you think. Do you think in any other industry you'd be allowed to sell counterfeit shares, counterfeit products to the public? Anyway, have a great day. God bless, and I appreciate y'all on this journey with me.